So, the most important thing that you want to start with for having strong line art is having a strong and clear sketch. From what I know from painting, you have a vague sketch because you're going to paint over it anyway, and you sort of render as you go. I mean, I have no idea, that's why I asked for a painting tutorial, but it's different in line art. You want a very clear sketch so you have no guesswork as to where you're going to place your lines. As you can see here in the beginning, I don't do so well in placing my lines correctly, but I know where they're supposed to go, and that's the most important part. Also use the undo button, because that's the perks of being digital. Spot blacks, which I'm starting to do right now, mostly go wherever there are gaps, and you don't think that shading with cell shading or whatever shading you want to do is going to add enough depth. If you're really afraid of inking that way with adding cell shading, with adding spot blacks, then you can add them on another layer once you're done inking everything else, which is fine. And so this thing I'm demonstrating right now is a tangent, and you don't want tangents because they look really bad, and they look unnatural to, sometimes I circle other things to demonstrate other tangents that I'm trying to avoid, so they look really bad because they look really unnatural. Like, you don't have tangents in the real world where you have things colliding together on a perfect edge. You usually have them overlapping in some way, or not lining up perfectly. So when they overlap perfectly, or they line up perfectly, or whatever the fuck, then it looks really strange, and your eye is automatically drawn to that, and you don't want that most of the time. I mean, you can use tangents sparingly and cleverly if you really know what you're doing, but that's like a advanced technique. So so line weight itself is governed by several things. It's like how physically present the object is. Like, so the collar is going to be thicker than the folds on the collar, because the collar is actually jutting out from the, shirt. And whether it overlaps something is another thing. I didn't do it completely perfectly in this one because I was kind of rambling at the same time, and I'm kind of recording over the speed process of this. But whether it overlaps something is really important. Sometimes I demonstrate what not to do, and that's why you might be like, what the hell is she inking right now? And like, that button right there is supposed to be like, that's too thick of a line. You're gonna be like, what the fuck is wrong with that button? So yeah, so whether it overlaps something is a big thing. I'm going to eventually go over and, here's one second. Here's me showing like how I would ink folds, which, like, some folds are thicker than other folds because they're more physically present. Sorry, I'm kind of trying to follow the bit a little bit, but here you can see that I sort of don't follow the sketch as closely as I can, but that's because I think I can do a better job than than the sketch has dictated, and I am confident in what I'm trying to accomplish, and I know what I want it to look like. If you don't have a sketch beforehand and you don't know what you're trying to accomplish, then it's going to look really wishy-washy and really wiggly, and that's when you require cleanup, and you don't really want to require cleanup because that's a whole extra step, and that's really Anyway, back to line weight. So how close it is to the camera, how detailed it is. So this doesn't really show up too much in this drawing, I guess with the buttons a little bit and the folds, but if the detail drawings, and I guess a little bit the cheek, you can see the cheek right under the eye. You don't want it to look like an extension of the eye because that would be really creepy, so you draw the cheek crease very thin because it's like a detail thing. And I also do it near the end of my inking with the fingers. I draw like little curves over the finger knuckles, so it doesn't look like there's an actual line on the fingers, but there's there's just like a guide, I guess, or detail that sort of informs the shape of what I'm doing. Folds are a little tricky. You don't want them as thick as your outlines or your actual shapes, though I don't know if I adhere to that completely here. Though if they're more physically present, then, you want them thicker. Another thing is how important the thing is. Like here, I'm going to start, not yet, but I'm going to start like outlining the hand a little thicker than it was initially because, there's me showing an overlap and a tangent. But I'm going to start outlining the hand a little thicker than before because it's like the focal point of, not the focal point exactly, but the sort of, I don't know the right word, but it's sort of the point of the picture because, like, oh, this character is finger gunning right now, and that is the most important thing you're supposed to take away from this picture. That is their action, that is like a facet of their personality that they're showing. Oh, here's the little lines that I was talking before. So I made that a little thick. I think I made it a little too thick, honestly, now I look at it, but I don't really want to base and clean up or whatever doing it over again. So, here's me thickening the lines a little bit so that. Also, another thing about me thickening the lines here is because it shows up, it's technically closer to the camera, so to speak, than the rest of the arms and body. So here I'm demonstrating that if the skirt line was too thick, then it would look like it was some sort of weird shape instead of being under the jacket. Then I'm inking a little more. Here I put spot blacks where the overlap, the little creases are, and the folds. So, and then I'm also demonstrating how to draw folds. Like the folds get thicker at the bottom and they taper towards the top, which is a little hard for me to draw in the with my pen pressure settings, but otherwise they're fine, which is nice, and I like them a lot. And if I, one sec, I'm kind of cheating a little bit sometimes because sometimes I don't get the perfect stroke, so I do clean up that way, but there's never like a separate cleanup step that I do. So, did I miss me doing the weird old lady lines on the character? I guess I did. But that was supposed to show like whether things are physically prominent or not, so if you're wondering about that, that's why. Now I'm gonna get to the shading, which is pretty fun for me. I mean, oh, and don't worry about the step right here where I make the mask or whatever, because usually I just use the fill bucket tool and I fill in all the colors, but I decided to skip that for this so we could get straight to the stuff that was requested. This is me cleaning up the lines a little bit. But yeah, so usually I just clip the line to, the shade layer to the colors that are already present, instead of creating a mask. So this is me demonstrating what not to do, which is sort of outlining every single line and shape, and I got really messy there, but you can see, you can kind of discern the entire shape of the person through that, and that just looks really bad. It looks really wishy-washy, and like, you don't want to be wishy-washy, you want to be confident. There's no clear light source when you do that thing that I just demonstrated, and there's no new information given, and the most important part of this stuff is like providing new information, like, oh, this is where the light is coming from, and I can see that because of the shade layer informing me of where the light is, even though there's not gonna be necessarily a sun floating in the air telling me this is where the light source is. And you want the line weight and inking to support the information you're supplying with the shading. And you want there to be info missing in both the line weight and in the inking. Like you can see here, like the face isn't completely filled in, so you're like, what happened to the rest of the face and what happened to the rest of the jacket? And it's because those don't get shaded because like that that's not how light sources work. And there's also should be information missing that, otherwise it's kind of redundant. Another thing is, don't be afraid to add big blocks of shading, like the end of the skirt. Here I'm showing again like the information that's missing and the information that's present, because I feel like a lot of times people are like, oh, I don't want to like cover up my inking or whatever with shade because that means that there's information lost, and it's like, that's kind of the point. You want there to be information that's not present there, and you want information that is given by each layer. I think I was kind of redundant there, which is kind of ironic, but hopefully this was helpful a little bit. Hopefully you liked it. Maybe not.